Are you using the right headless CMS? If you are, congratulations on your choice. If you aren't, then don't worry. Switching a headless CMS is not something that should cost you your job. I'm Andre, and in this video I'll show you what it takes to migrate from one headless CMS to another. Switching a headless CMS is not just about the headless CMS. You see, typically the headless CMS provides data for a website. But why is the website so far away from the headless CMS here? The reason is this long arrow that represents all the tools that are necessary in order to get the data from the CMS to the website. They can include Gatsby source plugin, SourceBit plugin, or Netlify deployment webhooks, or any other tools that you might be using in your implementation. So there are two parts. It's content migration and implementation migration. Now, are these really 50-50? It depends on the actual website implementation, because with the number of tools that you're using, the complexity of the implementation migration grows exponentially. So I would adjust the ratio a bit. Now in this video, I want to show you how to migrate content from Contentful to Kentico Content, another headless CMS. And in order to do that, I'll first show you what kind of content I have in my Contentful project. You see, this is the project that has 11 entries. 7 of them are blog posts, and each blog post has a title, URL slug. It can have an image or link to an external image using the image URL field, and has a rich text. The other content type, called About Me page, represents an item that contains nested content items. You see here under About Me items, there are 3 blocks of linked content items, and each of these items also features an image. So this project covers the most essential headless CMS functionalities, including linked items, rich texts, and assets. To migrate all these items, you can take 3 approaches. First approach is to use the content management APIs of both the source and target headless CMS and write your own migration scripts using the platform of your choice, provided that both headless CMSs feature SDKs for that platform, or you can use simple REST. The other option is to use a dedicated tool. Nowadays, a lot of developers open source their implementations, and you're likely not the first one who's trying to move content from one headless CMS to another. And the last choice is to use control copy and control paste. Now that's just for fun, it's not 1995 anymore. To migrate from Contentful to Content, there is already an open source tool available made by Matthew from Elanco, who has already used it to migrate a fairly large project from Contentful to Content, so it's not really an experimental tool. I cloned this repository to my local to show you how the migration process looks like. First of all, it's necessary to configure the access to the source and target CMS. In case of Contentful, we're gonna need a space ID and content management API token. Now that both CMSs are configured, we need to fetch data from Contentful into local JSON file. If you're running on Windows like me, you're gonna need to run the command in git bash, as it was generally written for Unix-based systems in shell scripts. So you see that now the tool downloaded all content items from Contentful's project into a local file called Contentful export in the folder exports. And it also downloaded all the assets that were used in my content items into assets folder. Now, before we migrate the data into content, make sure that the language code names are in order. In my Contentful project, I'm using en-us as my default language, while in content, I'm using default as my default language code name. So make sure to keep this in line, otherwise you'll end up with one extra language. Once the migration finishes, we can take a look in content if we have some data in. You see 11 content items are correctly imported. When we look at the About Me page, the linked items are also correctly linked. And when we look at the images in the blog posts, they are also there. Now let's take a look how the implementation migration looks like. This is the sample site implemented on Next.js using data coming in from Contentful. And you see the sample site displays all of my blog posts in this list, including the published date. Now, when we want to switch that site to get data from a different Headless CMS, we can just reinitialize the source bit. And we define Kentico Content as the new provider of data. And provide additional data for the plugin in order to get the data from the new Headless CMS. So here we need to add the project ID. And the default language code name. And once the configuration is saved, we can try to run the site. You see, it looks like it's not working. But when we look at what is in the HTML, the articles are there, only images are not displayed. So even when you switch the data providers this way, there are still some small things you will need to change in the implementation. In my case, it's the images. The Kentico Content plugin delivers images using only the image property, and the image URL actually has a different code name. So after these changes, the page should start working. And you see the page is working, including the timestamps. We might need to do some ordering as well, as different Headless CMS may deliver items in different order, but the website is working. So you see, the process of migrating from one headless CMS to another is not as simple as switching a light on or off, but it's also much easier than what we were used to with traditional CMSs and weeks of work. So I hope you liked this video. Feel free to use this QR code to get 2 extra months of full-featured trial of content. And also make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to make sure you won't miss new videos. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.